Unit 7.1, exponential function, which takes the form y equals a times bx. And we'll talk about this in just a minute. We'll talk about what a and b means. So the definition of an exponential function is a function that has a variable in the exponent. So if you notice, here we have y equals 2 to the x power and y equals 1/2 to the x power. Now, just a quick reminder, you can put 2 to the x power in the calculator, so you would do that. 2 raised to the x power. Remember, to get that x to go up there, you just have to use this caret button and it lifts it up. Alright, so this is your a and your b is your base. So your a is your y-intercept, and it's the y value when x is equal to 0. And here, this is your base, which is your multiplier, what you're multiplying by, and it's the product that causes the change. So let's go into a little bit more detail about a and b. So in this case, we're going to talk about your a first. So again, we just said that the a is the y-intercept, and it can be written as a number or it can be written as an ordered pair. So 0, comma, and then whatever the number is on the y-axis. And here I need you to know that a is your starting value or your initial amount. Okay, and on this one, your base, your b is your base, and remember, it's the multiplier. It's what gets multiplied by each time. So if you want to put that again in parentheses, just to remind yourself, but it is here. So it's just a reminder that it's the multiplier, and it basically describes how the function changes. So let's go ahead and go to the next part, which talks about growth and decay. So here, what I need you to know is if your b, what's being multiplied, increases, it's called a growth. And what you need to know is that the number is greater than 1. So here, if you read the graph from left to right, it increases, so that's why we call it a growth. Now, just to help you on today's lesson, it shouldn't take you very long, but you need to remember what your a and your b are. So your a is the number, so this is y equals a times b to the x power. So here our a is 1 and our b is 2. Remember, this is also called the y-intercept, and this is also called the base. So on your worksheet that you'll go over, it's going to ask you to fill out that information. So if you look here, your assignment's going to basically ask you to fill out this entire thing. And we'll talk about these 3 things in just a second. Okay, so let's look at the decay. So the decay goes down. So from left to right, it drops. So that's why you call it a decay. Now what I need you to know is it says if 0 is less than b and b is less than 1, then it's called a decay. So basically what I need you to know is that's basically a fraction less than 1. So here, again, if they have you identify, a is 4 and b is 1/2. Okay, let's take it a little bit further on a table. So here it's very easy to see because it's increasing and decreasing. So this is a little bit trickier because you don't see it right away. But if you look, if I go 1/2, 1, 2, 4, well, you should notice that these numbers at least are doubling. And in order for it to be an exponential function, it's gonna have to change by the same amount. So I'm going to show you that if I multiplied 1/2 times 2, that I get 1. So that's why I can say that I'm multiplying this by 2 as well. So I'm multiplying those numbers by 2. So what is the multiplier or the change? It's 2. Now, what about my y-intercept? Well, if you look up here, we talked about a y-intercept being a 0 and then a number. Well, here's 0 and a number. So that means that my y-intercept is 0, 1. Or just 1 if you wanted to write it. So, for this purpose, if I wanted to go a step further, I could write this equation. Y equals 1 times b, which is 2 to the x power. And I'll write this equation just so that you guys know where I'm getting these numbers from. So our a is 1, our b is 2, and it's always raised to the x power because it's an exponential function. If it's not raised to the x power, then it's not an exponential function. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. So again, let's look at the y-intercept because that's the easier one to see right away on this one. So this is our y-intercept. So if you look on this one, technically we're going down. What are we going down by? Well, some of you guys will see it a little bit better if we say that we're dividing by something. Well, what are we dividing by? So let me show you in the calculator how you would figure that out. So 3 divided by what will give me 1? Well, that's 3. So instead of saying I'm dividing by 3, could I say that I'm multiplying by 1/3? So is 3 times 1/3 1? So that's true. Now if I multiply that by 1/3, does it give me 1/3? Yes, it does. So last one, multiply it again by 1/3, gives me 1/9. So how is this changing? It's multiplying by 1/3. So what does that mean? That means that the b is 1/3. So if I write that equation, again, y equals a times b to the x power, that means that y is equal to our y-intercept, which is 1, times b, which is 1/3 to the x power. And we'll go over this in more detail tomorrow. Alright, so these next 3 things I need you to know for Algebra 1 purposes, these are always going to be true. So these never change. For Algebra 1, these are always true. Okay, Algebra 1 purposes, exponential functions, these 3 things are always true. Your domain is all real numbers. Your range is y greater than 0. And just so that you know, basically what it is saying is that all the numbers are going to be, for y, are going to be 0 and up. It cannot be 0, so that's why we don't put an equal sign underneath. Sorry. Now your asymptote, and yes, that's a funny word, but it is how you pronounce it, asymptote, is y equals 0. So again, these 3 things are always going to be the same. What I also need you to know is essentially this is your asymptote. Now, Hoy-Bucks. It's been a while since we talked about Hoy-Bucks. But remember, Hoy-Bucks is horizontal 0, y equals. Well, this is a horizontal line. So what does y equal? Y equals 0. So that's where this comes from. So just a little bit more explanation on how you get y equals 0. So it's true on both. On a decay or in a growth. So both are true. Y equals 0. So let's take a look at these last two problems. And yes, this is two different problems. There should be a line or something to divide that, but it didn't. So y'all should know that from reading left to right that this is automatically a decay. Because it's a decay, you should know that your b is going to be a fraction or a decimal. So here, if I look, I have -3, 8, 2, 4, -1, 2, 0, 1. And there's my y-intercept. That's what I need. So there's my a. That's my y-intercept, or my a. So that's 1. If you look, how is that changing? Well, what's 8 to 4 and 4 to 2 and 2 to 1? Isn't that half of it? So if it's half of it, well, that's the b. 1/2. Alright, now let's look at the very last problem. So John has 10 DVDs. He plans to triple the number of DVDs in his collection each year. Write the equation that represents the exponential function. So I need the initial amount, which is a, and I need the multiplier, which is b. So here's my initial amount. 10. My multiplier would be this sentence right here. He plans to triple his amount of DVDs each year. So triple, what does triple mean? Well, that's 3 times the number. So then we write this equation. Y equals a times b to the x power. So our equation is y equals 10 times 3 to the x power. And there's your answer. Alright. That is exponential functions.